All right. Thanks, Emery. Is this going to pass over to me here?
Yep, in just a
There
second.
we go.
I can see you.
Okay, so good afternoon or good morning wherever you're calling in from. This is Brian Walker from PowerPlan. I'll be running the webinar today. We'll be talking about spreadsheets and their role in the budgeting, reporting process, some of the limitations there and challenges, and maybe a better way you could be doing things. So let's get started. All right, so here's our agenda. Talk just a minute about who PowerPlan is, a little bit of an overview, touch upon why budget and actual reporting, why the need, what the importance is, and there's some information we'll take a look at regarding that, and what's unique to the budgeting process for nonprofits and public sector as well. And then we'll talk about this 5 smart reasons to do something better than Excel spreadsheet budgeting, and we'll take a quick look in the PowerPlan system as well to kind of put some of this in context of what the system has available. All right, so PowerPlan, we're a software company located in California, Huntington Beach, Orange County. Been around for quite a while, 1998, and we specifically work with primarily nonprofit and public sector and some healthcare. Those are kind of our key focus areas and really who we've worked with for the majority of the existence. What we do is we build the software solution that helps with budgeting and forecasting and has reporting capabilities, so budget managers have a tool where they can build up their budget data and also report on the results month to month, have all that information in a single centralized solution. And part of that is certainly integrating with the accounting system to bring those actuals in to our solution, so you have not only the actuals but all the way down to the transaction details. All right, so that's me. I've been with PowerPlan since 2006, working exclusively with nonprofit organizations. I've actually been working with nonprofit organizations since about 1998. Prior to that, prior to being at PowerPlan, I was implementing general ledger applications for nonprofits. So that's kind of been my focus, for quite a while now. And at PowerPlan, I've worked mostly on the business development side, pre-sales process, making sure that the fit's right for the customer. All right, so getting into specifics, why budget and report actual to budget? What's the importance here? Most every nonprofit and public sector organization, unless they're very small, is going to have a requirement to produce a budget. Typically have to get that approved by the board or city council. It's a formal part of the process. So what you're doing there is you're defining the program objectives, what you're trying to accomplish for the year, what's it going to cost to run your programs, what funding do you have, what funding shortfalls do you have, what gaps do you need to make up. Budgeting for surpluses as well can be an important part of the process. You want to have, in good times, some cash that you can store as a surplus and rely on that when times get leaner. So, budgeting is not necessarily just a net zero type process, but you should be, budgeting some surpluses. And then also certainly budgeting for what your cash requirements are. So, you might have things you're budgeting for, but when do you actually need to pay for those? A key aspect, certainly since nonprofits are service-based organizations, is the budgeting for the employee cost. So aligning the staffing with your other expenses too, but aligning the staffing requirements, what it's going to cost you to run your programs with your program objectives. How many staff members do we need? Is this a healthcare center? There's certain ratios you might have to follow. How many staff members, how many nurses do we need? What's that going to cost us? What are the benefits involved? All those types of calculations. And it also is important to measure, not just going into the year, but actively measure against the budget throughout the year. So how are we doing? Are we going to come in, about where we expected? Do we need to make up in some other areas? That way you know where you're going and you can plan for it ahead of time instead of having surprises at year end or later in the year. So those are some of the key aspects of certainly why we budget and the requirements there. So moving forward here. So there was an interesting study done by the software company Abila, who's the maker of the MIP accounting package, which they work with a lot of nonprofits and public sector and is a partner of ours. And they surveyed a number of different things that they looked at, but one of the specific questions they asked was, what's your biggest single financial challenge? And they asked this of 400 nonprofit organizations. And I thought this was interesting because managing the budget was the second most common answer. Not that it's the second biggest problem, but the second largest amount of respondents said that's the biggest financial challenge they have. So why is that such a challenge? Building a budget, managing against it, why should that be such a challenge? And I think this has to do certainly with the tools that organizations are still using. The tools are using, the complexity of the process. So nonprofits and public sector have potentially a very complex process. They're not like a regular for-profit business, which might have a couple simple things they do. They often have numerous lines of service. To accommodate this, you might have to have a chart of account structure that seems like it's all over the place with the segmentation and the different things you have to do and the way you have to reclassify things down to the smallest increments. A lot of allocations going on there to take your administrative costs and allocate those out. Certainly on the funding source side, depending on how you're funded, there can be a lot of complications there as well. There's a lot of allocations related to that. We have resources, employee resources that are allocated across a lot of different funding sources. That can be complicated. You might have, as you build up the budget, different ways you have to calculate. So you have a fee-for-service program. It has very complex calculations for the revenue side, depending on what the units of measure are and how you're building that out, versus another type of program you have that might just be a fixed contract. So those are going to be very different. And then on the reporting requirements, since you have different funding sources, you can't always choose the way you're going to report things based on your own terms. You have to follow what is required from the funding side. So if they're funding you, they might have their own requirements and might be different account groupings, different ways of looking at the calculations, and you kind of have to fall within those guidelines. And then certainly going along with that is, how do you calculate indirect costs? You might have one way you like to do it internally for showing what the true costs of running your programs are. However, you may have funding sources that have different methods that you have to follow. They might have just an indirect cost rate, might have exclusions you have to take out. So we'll see, quite often we've seen organizations that might even, our tool do it both ways. So, within the program, the true budget is developed by the indirect cost rate allowed by the funding source, but they might like to take and use like our allocation tool, allocate the costs out in a different factor, the way they see things truly weighted, in order to get what they think is the true cost of running that program. And then they could see, how does this align with what the funder is giving us? Is it worth continuing to run that program? And then as I talked about a little bit already, the reporting side of it, depending on who your key stakeholders are that you need to report to, whether it's the board of directors, city council, funding sources, donors, the public, city residents, could be all over the place. So a recent study found that 75% or more of finance staff are still using Excel for major portions of this process. So that's kind of what we're talking about here today. It's the Excel process. What are some of the limitations? How can that make your life a little bit more difficult, and what can we do to better that? So let me get this going one more screen here. Hold on. There we go. So 5 smart reasons to kick Excel spreadsheets to the curb. All right, so 1, it's not a centralized tool. I mean, it can be to some degree. I mean, you can kind of try to make it work that way, but it's not exactly what it's designed for. It's not the way it's usually used. So usually when we see budgets built on spreadsheets. There's a lot of sending, creating a template, sending it out, waiting until that's done, collecting it back, having to incorporate and roll up all that information with the other spreadsheets you get back and see what the total combined budget is. And there's a lot of moving parts and pieces going around and trying to keep up on, what's the latest version. Do you have everything in place that you need? Another key factor we see with spreadsheets is that, spreadsheets are nice because they're so flexible. You can put any amount of detail in there, descriptions, notes, supporting calculations, whatever you want, really. However, at the end of the day, you build that all up in the spreadsheet. You're not usually using that same tool, or if you are, you're going through kind of a difficult process, but you're not usually using that for your monthly actual versus budget reporting. So you end up with, spreadsheets that have all these supporting details. You're using another tool for doing actual versus budget variance analysis whenever you want to get back and see, okay, how did I build up this budget value? What were the details behind it? You have different sources of information. So it's not just an easy case of drilling into the number and seeing how you built up the budget values. You have to go elsewhere for that source. C here, difficult to manage access and security. There's not a whole lot of security, obviously, around Excel and how you can do some things to kind of lock down different cells and so forth, but it's not built, based on a multi-level security model. And just overall, no single version of the truth, meaning, your truth or your final budget number is going to be only as good as, you've controlled the process. You have these moving parts of spreadsheets going out, coming back. How well have you managed to incorporate that all together and make sure that there's, no links broken and things like that. All right, which gets into number 2, the really obvious one, potential errors. And this is something that I had firsthand experience with, and I've seen it at organizations too, but before my work with nonprofits and consulting, I was working as an accountant, and in my first job, where I used to work actually as a cost accountant with Mitsubishi, the television division of Mitsubishi, very early on there, I was handed the budget process, which was all done in Excel. And the reason was that the guy who was doing it prior had like a $13 million formula error in his calculations, and which is a pretty significant error. It was a decent sized budget, about a $250 million budget, but $13 million is obviously nothing you just want to have being reported back to Japan, which is what happened. So with that, they basically handed that off and said, go through these spreadsheets and find all the errors and so forth. And that was kind of my first introduction to getting into the budget process, and that was all done on Excel. So I've seen, certainly how that can go wrong firsthand. So formula errors, and it's difficult to manage the formula, certainly. You have different spreadsheets. Every single one has to be linked through formulas. There's no roll-up structure or anything to maintain that. There's a lot of different places that you can have errors and things you have to check. Now the other side of that, which is B, is within spreadsheets there's no way to follow the links. No like drill down where you can say, well, I'm on this sheet, I just want to drill into the next one. You have to kind of navigate through the different sheets as opposed to just sort of drilling through your formulas, which is what a budget tool like the Power Plan system can do for you. And then also, again, the security side. So I've seen this to different levels of success. Some organizations are pretty good at Excel, and they'll lock out the formula fields better than others. So there's some things you can do there, but it can still certainly be a risk. All right, then there's number 3, the efficiency side of it. Actuals are not automatically incorporated into the Excel spreadsheets. That's a key thing. As you're budgeting, you want to have access to your actuals without having to navigate somewhere else and look at that. Being able to drill all the way down to transaction details, that type of information. So unless you've created some link or some way of doing that, you're probably, which I've seen a lot, is doing it in a manual process, exporting the actuals out, pulling them into your budget templates, creating the budget templates, sending them out. So going through this whole process where you're really recreating everything each time. So let's say you've captured all this information, you've managed to not have any formula errors, then you still have to somehow format all this to get it back into your GL. Hopefully, at a minimum, you're formatting it and importing it, but I've certainly seen plenty of instances where organizations are just basically capturing everything and then rekeying it into the GL. That's kind of the worst case scenario. And with these inefficiencies, you really spend more time in just the exercise of collecting the data than having the time to really go through this information and analyze the numbers. It becomes an exercise more than something that's value added. All right, see if I can get this to advance. There we go. All right, so last two here. It's difficult to track changes in Excel. One thing that can be difficult is different versions of the budget. So if you have like a budget template that you use, you can very easily make another copy of that and create the whole new budget there. But now you have budgets that are in two completely different workbooks. It's not like you can just add a column to your report and say, okay, well, let's compare this budget to this one side by side, see where there's differences. You'd have to, again, start creating links and sort of creating your own report formats to do that. Now, a more just technical element is there's no audit trail where you can see the actual changes. It's not tracking things in an audit trail in Excel and tracking it by user, who made the change, when the change was made, things like that. And in Excel, there's really no top-down tools. So let's say we built up this Excel budget. We've got a $20 million expense budget. We need to take something out of there, so we look at a couple line items, what supplies, whatever it is, IT supplies, and we want to just sort of cut off the top. So there's no easy way to do that in Excel. Just let me take 10% off this line item and let it distribute straight back down to the individual departments, programs, projects that are underneath this without going back through each sheet and sort of touching it from a bottom-up type process. So that's some of the inefficiencies of the Excel side. It's kind of built for one directional flow of data, unless you've designed something really pretty special in Excel, I suppose. So the last thing here, which kind of encompasses all the first ones, what you're doing in Excel is you're really trying to create a budgeting tool, which there's already software products that were built for these type of processes. They're specialized software products to facilitate the budgeting process. And Excel is a fantastic tool, and or if you're using another spreadsheet tool, they're fantastic for things like exporting data and doing some analysis and things like that. But as the data collection source, that's where they really have the limitations. So be there. One of the examples I usually give, with your accounts payables, you have vendors that need to get paid and invoices that are entered and so forth. Would you do that in Excel? You certainly could, right? You could list out the different vendors and who you owe what in Excel and when those payments are due, and when you write the check, sort of mark that off. All that could be done in Excel as well, but there are specialized modules that take care of that, and so that's what you use. And the power plan system is kind of the same thing. It's the specialized module. It's kind of like the subledger for budgeting, where you capture all of this information, build up the budgets, and then in addition, has all the stored details in there for employee level budgeting, overhead allocations, these roll-up structures, which is really what eliminates a lot of the formula linking you do in Excel. You could do unlimited versions and then integrate it with the actuals, which is what I was going to get to there initially. It's not only the budgeting side, but it's also a reporting and variance analysis tool. So I was going to jump into the Power Plan product and spend a few minutes there just kind of navigate through those last items I touched on and just real quick what they look like. For those of you, and I'll touch on this when we get to a later slide, for those of you interested in more information or wanted a personalized demo, you can visit our website, powerplancorp.com, and I'll bring that up on a later slide. So there's a contact us item on there if you want to get in contact with us. So let me get out of this, log in here. And we'll just take about 5 minutes here and walk through a few few of the screens and kind of contrast, you know, what we know we work with in Excel to what we would see in a system that's, you know, built around this process. So I have some budget templates here, and I have my report views, got my payroll details over here. I'm going to start on my budget template. So let's say we're going into the budget process. I need to put in some budget figures for fiscal year 2016. And we're currently working on the original version of the budget, so you can have unlimited different versions. Everybody's putting their data into the same version at the same time. The other ones should typically be locked. And so we've got the different account codes here. What we would do is just come up here, and based on this hierarchy, select where do we want to budget. So let's say I'm working in childcare, and it's this infant care program. So that's specifically where I'm navigating to build my budget. We're at the input status. So I'm going to go through and fill out the lines here. And what you have access to is also this history panel. I mentioned having actuals available at the same time is really a key aspect of the process. So this allows me to go through and see down here actual information about each account. So if we're budgeting out the 65,300 account, and I'm looking down here, I want to see last year's actuals month by month, or I'm sorry, current year-to-date actuals, last year's, 2 years prior. Got my prior budget data down here. Any of these numbers, we can drill down to transaction details. So again, it's drill down levels, not having to link things together. And so as we budget this, I may want to use one of my data entry options. And let's just fill that row from actuals. Maybe I want to pick up last year, add 2% to that. So we've just pulled that in there. Documentation is always key. So let's put in a note. You may want to attach an outside document for reference. So we save that in there. So we've saved the value. The note is stamped over here with the little yellow tab. That'll be visible throughout the system, whether you're here on the template, on a report, so you can always see your notes. Coming down here to another line, maybe we want to go through, and let me go down to my expenses here. And a little bit further down. I've got most of these filled in already. Let's say building insurance. So for this one, maybe I have a couple different insurances I want to fill out. This probably wouldn't go into that budget, but just picking some random accounts here. A couple different insurance plans we want to fill out. I can itemize these by going into budget details. And so what this, let's say this is the West Street building. And I'm going to put that in there. Whatever that is. So this allows you to go through and make individual entries underneath the GL account, store as many details as you want. Again, it's all about, you know, building up from the detail level, having that information available. So it'll stamp that over here with the little red tab. So you've always got that you can drill back into here, or from any report you'll see that available. Another detail that we have in the system, employee level details. So under any of these yellow color accounts, these are all locked values. We can, if we have security access, see the payroll details. So at the next level down, I could see these two employees, Alex and Robert, and the individual details for all of their calculations, how they might be allocated across the system. So if I look in here for Alex, I can see his total budget of $71,000 based on all the different calculations, and how he's allocated across the organization, which in this case he's allocated across, you know, a number of different budgets here. So this infant care program that I'm working in actually is only a representation of 10% of salaries, taxes, and benefits for Alex. Okay, Close back out of that. So if we've gone through and filled out all of our budget information, whatever we want to put in there, you can use workflow to track the status. So if I selected here that I want to move this on to the next stage, I put a note in here. And what that allows is for users to go through and see where everything's at. So across the organization, we can see over here, these are all still at the input stage, and the stages are all configurable, so they would have a specific meaning to your organization. But we can see these are all at the input stage. These ones are moved on to review, and whatever your different stages are. So once the budgets are built up, then it's about reporting and different types of reports, whether it's reviewing the budget information. A couple key ones up here you might take a look at. So come in here and see how your budgeted FTE look across the organization. So by department, I've got a report laid out here. I can go through each department and I can see my budgeted FTEs. Got another report here where if I just want to see the monthly budget across all of my account codes, it's kind of a standard layout in summary format, just kind of rolling things up. And then throughout the year, also using the system for variance analysis. So if I'm the program manager, I built out the budget for this child care program. That's probably all I would have access to. I wouldn't have access to the rest of this information, but I can use the system then to keep track of all the actuals as they are posted month by month and see my variances, and then very easily drill down into the details to see where the differences are. So at my program level, I see I've got a total variance here of 600,000. Maybe I want to drill down into this, see exactly at the next level. Maybe I have different projects or grants that are the makeup of that. Where is all that coming from? Where are the differences? Drill back up here. If I've identified some differences in a specific area, I could drill down to a lower level report where we're expanding everything, maybe go into one of those specific areas. And when you're getting down to this level, you're now down to where you have your supporting details. So I can see the notes. I can see that entry I did right there on my budget column. How did I build that budget number? How did I put in these different items with the budget details? When it comes to salaries, being able to drill down into the payroll details, see which employees are there. So those are some of the key aspects. You can see how I'm kind of drilling through the data. It's all through hierarchies and drill down levels, not having to worry about linked access across different spreadsheets. But having the access, everything kind of in a centralized place as far as how you built the budget, the actuals coming in. And on the actual side, one thing that's important to note is we have drill down there as well. If we're looking at something, you want to drill down. The supporting details on that side are going to be transaction details. Actually, let me go down one level here. I was in a total account there. There's where I meant to go. There we go. So you can have all your posted entries you drill down to as well. Okay. So back over here to wrap things up. So what should some of the key takeaways be from this session? Hopefully it's been somewhat helpful to you. Budgeting is certainly a key process. As we mentioned, in any organization of any size, it's really a requirement and can be a complex process, especially for nonprofits and public sector, due to all the different funding sources and reporting requirements and so forth. And then the tool that's commonly being used still, 75% or more of the time, Excel. As I mentioned, it's great for certain things. I use it all the time for certainly data manipulation and analysis and things like that. But as far as like the centralized collection tool, there's definitely some limitations. And you could be, because of those limitations, you could be spending a lot more time on your process than you really need to be. Okay, so if you're interested in gathering some more information, our website is powerplantcorp.com, which is listed down there at the bottom. There's actually a recorded product demo, a short recorded product demo, but it has screenshots and so forth. And then there's also a link on there where you can request a product demonstration. So if you're interested or just have general questions about the system, feel free to contact us. We're definitely happy to help out, provide additional information or do a personalized one-on-one demo where we can really talk about, your process, your requirements, and how the system might apply to those.
This is great, Brian. I wanted you to know I've been watching chat, and I'm not seeing any questions come through, but I also didn't mention it in the beginning. So if anybody has any questions for Brian, you can go ahead and use the chat function, send them our way right now, and he can go ahead and take care of those.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that earlier as well.
That's
so if you can find the chat, it's on the little navigation bar within GoToMeeting.
Yes.
And we'll just hold on here for a few minutes if anybody has any questions. Sorry, Emery.
That's okay. I just also wanted you all to know that we will be sending you the recording to this webinar. So you'll have the slides as well as the voiceover, and you'll get to see how when he went into the Power Plant tool, you'll get to see all of that too. So good stuff there. I'm not seeing any questions come through. Looks like you were very thorough, Brian.
Either that or they're not finding the chat function.
Let's see.
We'll hang on another minute, though.
Okay.
Well, still not seeing anything there, so maybe we'll wrap it up. And certainly, as we've shown here, go ahead and go to the website, and you could use the contact us or request a demo. There's a couple of links on there where you can get in touch with us, and we're happy to answer any additional questions if you think of something later or wanted a follow-up demo of the system.
That sounds great.
Right.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Emery.
Bye-bye.